Today is the 58th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma, Alabama. Despite the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Jim Crow's grip remained tight on Dallas County, Alabama, where more than half the population was black, but less than 2% were registered to vote. Selma, Alabama was an especially dangerous place. Home to the violently racist Sheriff Jim Clark, a combination of required literacy tests, economic intimidation, and violence were used to prevent black voter registration. Racial tensions came to a head on February 18, 1965, when state troopers clubbed protesters and fatally shot 26-year-old Jimmy Lee Jackson, a protester who was trying to protect his mother who was being struck by police. Civil rights leaders planned to take their cause directly to George Wallace, the governor of Alabama, on a 54-mile march from Selma to Montgomery. Although Governor Wallace ordered state troopers to use whatever measures were necessary to prevent a march, 600 voting rights advocates set out from the Brown Chapel AME Church on Sunday, March 7th. The march was led by SCLC Representative Hosea Williams and 27-year-old SNCC Chairman and future U.S. Congressman John Lewis. They marched through Selma and began to cross the steel-arched bridge spanning the Alabama River, named for Confederate general and reputed Grand Dragon of the KKK, Edmund Pettus. On the other side of the bridge was a wall of state troopers, billy clubs in hand, and dozens of white spectators waving Confederate flags. The marchers stopped 50 feet from authorities. They were ordered by Bullhorn to disperse before troopers on foot and horseback with gas masks on their face advanced, knocking marchers to the ground and hitting them with billy clubs, whips, and lengths of rubber tubing covered in barbed wire under a cloud of tear gas. Although forced back in the brutal attack, the men, women, and children protesting did not fight back. In fact, many were chased down as they attempted to flee. Television cameras captured the entire assault, and at 9:30 p.m., ABC newscaster Frank Reynolds interrupted the network's broadcast of Judgment at Nuremberg, ironically a movie that explored Nazi bigotry and the culpability of those who followed orders and didn't speak out against the Holocaust, to air the footage. Nearly 50 million Americans who tuned in to watch the movie saw the footage and were horrified at the violence, and the sounds of screaming and crying mingled with the cheers of onlookers. 2 days later, on March 9th, Martin Luther King Jr. traveled to Selma to attempt a second march, but they turned back when state troopers again blocked the highway at the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Finally, on March 21st, after a federal court order permitted the protest, voting rights advocates marched from Selma under the protection of National Guard troops. 4 days later, they reached the Capitol steps in Montgomery with a crowd that had grown to 25,000. The events in Selma and the outraged response and sympathy of many Americans mobilized Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act, which President Johnson signed into law on August 6, 1965. Today, the same bridge that served as the backdrop to Bloody Sunday is a symbolic civil rights landmark, but still bears the name of white supremacist Edmund Pettus. Be sure to follow if you'd like to see tomorrow's Today in History.